You talk about influencers. These are influencers, and they're friends of mine. Jack Posobiec. Where's Jack? Jack, he's done a great job.
All right, Jack Posobiec, we're back here live, Human Events Daily. We're on with Megan Basham. She's out of Charlotte, North Carolina. She's also a journalist with the Daily Wire. And this horrific killing of Iryna Zarate, a Ukrainian refugee, young girl, young blonde girl. You know, I don't think her being Ukrainian actually had anything to do with it, other than it just adds to the tragedy that she was trying to flee a war-torn country and ends up being killed herself here in the United States, where she's supposed to be saved. And President Trump brought this up earlier today. I want to try to pull this clip. I'm going to see if the guys can get it. But in a speech that I was attending at the Museum of the Bible, he was referring to this horrific video, and he said, essentially, you have to do horrible things to stop horrible things. And as disgusting as it was, you could hear it. You could hear in his voice a father's heart, where he's got two daughters, and the resolve that we must respond with force, with military, law enforcement, whatever it is, to stop all of this. Megan, why was this person sitting behind her on this train?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And, I want to start by just highlighting some of the responses of the media and our local leadership here in North Carolina, because obviously the legacy media has had a total blackout on this story until this morning, when they finally started talking about it a little bit because of the outcry. And then you've got our Democrat governor, who, after more than 2 weeks, finally acknowledged this murder after massive public shaming. And then you have our mayor, who put out her initial statement, did not mention the victim at all. In fact, she called for empathy and compassion for the perpetrator. She said, "We will never arrest our way out of issues such as homelessness and mental health. I want to be clear that I'm not villainizing those who struggle with mental health or who are unhoused. Mental health is just a disease like any other and deserves compassion like cancer or heart disease." So she is comparing this violent killer on the streets to someone with cancer or heart disease. Now, the reason that they're putting out this kind of rhetoric, and the reason that our mayor, Live Viles, was out thanking the media who chose not to share this video, is because they don't want you to know about the policies that led to it. So immediately in the wake of George Floyd's death back in 2020, our current governor was then Attorney General. He's a Democrat, Josh Stein. He instituted a task force in racial equity in criminal justice. So kind of a mouthful. But so he instituted this racial justice task force that was supposed to reform our policing and court system. Well, here's the policies it put in place. Expanded pre-trial release, which means they wanted minority arrests to be released with little or no bail. They also wanted to decriminalize homelessness and what they called public behavior, meaning basically being a menace on the public streets. Now, this man, DeCarlos Brown, was arrested 14 times before, including for grand larceny, breaking and entering, assault with a deadly weapon. He had many arrests. So the problem here was not policing. In fact, he had 4 encounters, I think, in 2024 with this CMPD. And every time, and in this case, it was the public behavior, being homeless, creating a menace on the streets. Every time they released him to resources, they didn't jail him. His most recent arrest was in January. And in that case, he called 911 from a hospital. He was apparently freaking out at the hospital. The hospital staff didn't know how to deal with him. They called the police when he was saying there was something inside his body that was man-made and controlling him. So the police, not knowing how to handle him, at that point, told him to just disperse, and instead he called 911. Well, when he went before the judge on these charges, even though he has this long history, and even though he's clearly a violent threat and been diagnosed with schizophrenia, she once again released him on pre-trial release. Now, that's really important to know, because that is what this task force pushed for. These were the policies that Josh Stein's Racial Equity Task Force pushed for. And now we see the results. And, you know, it's not just in this one case. This case is getting a lot of attention, as it should. But if you look at the statistics, homicides in Charlotte are up 25% last year. And it was the second highest year on record. The first highest was 2020, when we indulged the Black Lives Matter riots. Shootings into occupied properties are up 40% since 2020. We have all kinds of crimes like that. Our violent crime rate is skyrocketing, and it's specifically because of the policies that came out of that Black Lives Matter social justice moment, where suddenly they said, well, we have to have racial equity, so we can't jail these violent offenders. Instead, we have to give them pretrial release. And that's what happened here.
And Megan, you wrote about in your let's connect it back to religion now, because you wrote about this, how there are so many in Shepherds for Sale, that there are many churches now or faith-based organizations that are also preaching this incredibly radical social justice.
Yeah. And, you know, I'll tell you what's really disturbing to me is that so many of these pastors, one of the, you know, most followed, most known pastors in the country is Steven Furtick. He's right here in Charlotte. He was certainly someone who was prominently promoting Black Lives Matter. He frequently posted about George Floyd, did the Black Square, all of that. He has said nothing about this death in his own backyard. I can name a number of other North Carolina well-known pastors. The former president of the Southern Baptist Convention, which is the largest Protestant denomination in the United States, its president, J.D. Greer, is a pastor here in Raleigh. He also promoted Black Lives Matter. He said that evangelicals should use the slogan and support their police reforms. He has also said nothing about this death in his own state. And it's really important because these are the pastors who helped legitimize these false Black Lives Matter claims that we had racial injustice in our policing and court system. And these were their support of these things helped gin up public support to back these policies that are now increasing our crime rates and making us unsafe in our city centers. So now you have a new administration that has to come in and deal with these problems.
It's sick. It's disgusting. But you know what? We've got truth on our side, and we're going to fight back. Megan Basham, you are fighting back. Tell people where they can follow you, where they can get the book.
You can find me on Twitter at Meg Basham, Instagram at journalist Megan Basham, and you can buy Shepherds for Sale, where I go into a lot of how these pastors supported Black Lives Matter and the social justice movement, really anywhere books are sold.
Megan Basham, go give her a follow, folks. Thank you so much for being here once again on Human Events Daily. We're going to get into more about the America Praise initiative with John Yep. Catholics for Catholics joins us next here on Real America's Voice, Human Events Daily.